on a farm. And it didn't say these things didn't matter, but it said things like whether your feed storage is horizontal or vertical, whether your livestock are housed in free stalls or tie stalls, matters, not that much. How big your herd is, matters, not as much. But milk production far and away exceeded all other factors in terms of the profitability of your herd. And that stuck with me, and that became my sort of mantra, or the thing I think about when I went to bed at night, when I get up in the morning, how can I get more milk out of my cows? And that's what I did. And I did leave the industry, but I never had financial complaints about how dairy farming treated me. And so the other part is, now as a chartered accountant, I enjoy doing farm tax, farm preparation of financial statements. And what I saw as a producer and what I read in that article is what I see as an accountant today. That if you show me a cow herd that has high production, I'll show you a highly profitable herd. In general, not in fact. I wanted to talk about something different even before I started. I'm a longtime 4-H member, and I don't know if there are any others here who went to provincial leadership camp, but it's 60 years since the first provincial leadership camp. There's going to be a reunion at the University of Guelph next summer, August 17th, an afternoon and an evening. And if anyone is interested, there are brochures. You'll see lots of stuff about it in the 4-H. And maybe just one other story before I get into the presentation. My daughter turned 30 last week, just a few days ago, and lots of things have changed in the industry, but here's another one that's changed in healthcare. So 30 years ago, I was coming to Dairy Day at Grey Bruce Farmers Week, and Michelle had been born. She was about 5 days. She was born January 1st, so she should have been coming today. You'd give her to the hospital within 24 hours. But then, at that time, I could ask, could you keep my wife and baby in the hospital for another day so that I could go to Grey Bruce Farmers Week, and I did. So anyways. This is sort of a standard disclaimer that comes with all BDO presentations, but it's important today because I want to be very clear that what I'm talking about, this isn't a canned BDO presentation. This is my presentation for the most part. So if you go home and think, boy, those guys at BDO don't know much, you're mistaken. You can go home and say, Neil McCutcheon doesn't know very much, but don't blame it all on BDO. So I just wanted to be clear, these are my thoughts. And one thing I'm very envious of the other presenters, today and other years, they get to have lots of nice, pretty pictures in their presentation. When you're an accountant, it's pretty tough to put a bunch of numbers up there and keep everybody from falling off their chair. So I'm throwing in a few pictures along the way. And I never had six two-year-olds that went up to the manger that looked like that, but that's a beautiful bunch, whoever the fellow is that owns those. So when I talked about that story, and you have probably, if you don't mind, I like to ask my clients, or I did this last year, I'd ask them when I met with them, what correlates on your farm most highly with profitability? And because I think profitability is what's going to keep you in business over the long haul. And I think pretty well every one of them that I met with would have said milk production. I have some cash croppers that would say their marketing skills, so they're saying price, is more important than production. So, but I think most people, whether you've read any research or not, would know intuitively that production is the key or what correlates most highly with profitability. So you might pick some others, but this is sort of like what I read in that article in Hordes years ago. So I picked out this another article I'm going to talk about a little bit from Kansas State University, and it is called, and maybe some of you have seen it, says Factors Impacting Dairy Profitability from Kansas State University, and I will put you all to sleep if I read all of what's in here, but what they did over a 20-year period was analyze 38 dairy farms that were small to mid-size, so less than 100 cows on average, what correlated most highly with profitability. And they talked about these approaches to increasing profitability that the producers would have. So these are some of the sort of options that they think producers have. To minimize costs, increase prices. So American study, so they can sell somewhere else or get a higher, so that's why we got that. That's really not an option here. Minimize assets per production unit to reduce the fixed costs. Or lastly, increase production to maximize revenue and profit. And their thought was managers should identify where they should most spend the time, because we're all going to spend some time on some of those factors. So the Kansas State study put the producers into three groups. So it's 38 of them. So they had the top third, middle third, and the bottom third based on profitability. I'm going to show you another Ontario study that does it a different way, but this is what they looked at. So the difference between the high third, most profitable, and the low third, and that's the average of those two thirds, was 1,953 kilograms in pounds, because it's US, but I converted it to kilograms, and $776 in 2011 more. They also spent $92 per cow more on feed, so it didn't get to keep all of that $776. And these were larger herds. So the more profitable herds on a per cow basis were larger, and they were saving $210 of labor per cow. So it's nice if you're bigger, but look how much bigger this the milk sale is compared to the cost of feed and the labor savings. And just another point from the study, and there's all sorts of stuff. I just don't want to put you to sleep on this. Most other cost categories are higher on the top 1/3 of the most profitable herds. So what that says to me is they're not cheapskates. The producers, they're making sure that they have the resources to get things done in a timely basis. So they're not cheapskates, or maybe they're tax avoidance, I'm not sure. But anyways, those are the things that I saw. And I'm going to just go to the summary comments. By the way, Brian Betts asked me to make sure I went very quickly. The Leafs face off at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so I'm moving along pretty good, or trying to. So these are the summary comments. When analyzing why some producers are more profitable than others, milk production is a much stronger indicator of profit differences than is price or cost. So, and then this other one, and this next one kind of, when they say, it says, while macroeconomic factors. When it says macroeconomic, that's like what's going on with, I call it new NAFTA, I think Ralph called it CUSMA, Americans call it USMCA. So those are macroeconomic factors beyond your control. So while those factors impacting overall profitability in the dairy industry are important, individuals' management skills are more important for long-term business survival. So you have control over your options. And that's definitely what I see. Over time, good times, bad times, the guys that can manage make money. I'm going to switch to, I got another picture here for you, and I'm going to go on to the Ontario study. Okay, so this next study, it's different. So that Kansas State study has all sorts of analysis and commentary. The other one that I'm going to show you is this one. Some of you may participate. This is the Ontario Dairy Farm Accounting Project and the Canadian Dairy Commission. I borrowed somebody's paper here. And actually, just a quick comment. If anybody's doing their own application for DFIP and you get past the lottery into the detailed section, both of these would be good references to do, because they're going to ask you for costing and so on, and there's very good information in these two documents about doing that. So the Ontario so they've got 70, the Ontario one has 70 producers, and they voluntarily, I don't know that they're asked or exactly how that works, but they voluntarily participate. And this information is used for the cost of production formula. So there's a weighting, and somebody probably here could correct me exactly how the national cost of production formula works, but part of it is coming from that, and part of it's coming from the CPI. So they do things different in this project. So I talked about Kansas. They were 3 groups, top 15 based on profitability. They're taking the top, the top or least cost producers, 15 of them, 15 highest cost producers or most expensive, and then the other 40 in the middle. So there's a difference in how these are categorized. So, and there's no analysis. You just get the data. So the analysis here, you see, that's my analysis. That's not DFO's or the Canadian Dairy Commission's or anyone else's. These are my thoughts. So we look at this. So the bottom 15 are highest cost producers. Whoop, wrong spotting. They average 43 cows per farm, and the lowest cost, their top 15, averaged 120. So the higher herd size is a lower cost. Milk sold per cow, we've got about 7,400 liters per year. versus 10,400. And in dollars, we've got, this is the low group of sales, 5,600. The top group, or the average of the top group, 8,100, for a difference of $2,500. That's a big number. If you've got 100 cows, that's $250,000 bucks. That's a lot of money. Again, one of the things that happens here is we've got labor per cow. This is on an annual basis. So the higher cost producers have 143 hours per cow. Or sorry, that'll be the higher cost, and the lower cost has 72 hours per cow. So big difference. When I think about herd size, which you've seen here, they're more profitable, and what I see, I think about herd size, you have to be a critical size. And I don't know what that number is, but I don't think you can make a living in this province milking 10 cows a day. And I don't know where that number gets to when you can say, I can make a living doing this, but that, you have to get up to that critical size. And I would encourage, my sort of general thought is, if you haven't had an expansion in a generation, it's maybe time to think about it. So that's what I pulled out of that study. So these are my thoughts about why is there such an increase in profitability related to production, regardless of herd size. And I think most of this will make sense. Most indirect and overhead costs are fixed relative to production. So your property taxes, any rent you're paying, interest, insurance, office, hired labor, those don't change. Doesn't matter whether your cows are given 30 liters a day, 35, 40, those things stay the same. And in addition to that, I think if you looked on your financial statements and you had variable costs or direct costs, a lot of those don't change as well. So I think things like stable supplies, calf rearing costs, crop expenses, veterinary and breeding don't change a whole heck of a lot regardless of your production. And I would argue that if you had a herd or you had a facility and you had cows given 30 liters a day, if you were to take them to 35, your costs, except for buying feed and quota, would not change all that much. Probably going to be more herd management activities that would change. So those are those two studies, the Kansas State study and the Ontario study. And I'm just going to go back to this because I'm going to talk a little bit about benchmarking. And I'm going to talk about, this comes from the Kansas State study. So I'm just pop back. So it says, how should we analyze our data on our farm if we're going to do some benchmarking? Should we do it based on a per cow or per kilogram? They do it per hundredweight of milk produced. Which is the right way to do it? So what they did, so if you could look at this here, and you can't read this at the back, I'm absolutely certain, and it's not necessary. So this is the ranking, but this is number 1 based on per hundredweight, or sorry, that's per cow. And going along the x-axis here, this is per cow, or per hundredweight, sorry. One's per cow, one's per hundredweight. And it's virtually the same, it does not matter. So if we're doing benchmarking, whether we do or comparing, whether we do it on a per cow or a per hundredweight basis, doesn't really matter. The way those shake out is going to be the same. Okay, time for some more nice pictures. Farming, it's amazing to me how picturesque farming is. And I have take the Ontario Farmer magazine into work because I still get it. And there you go. Courtney's a fan. The way that you can get, especially with drones now and with auto steer on tractors, so the roads are so straight. My dad would be so envious. And it's so, look at those straight rows. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. There was some great corn yields this fall, so congratulations to you guys. Oh, this is a story I want to tell you about. So this is actually a story about resourcefulness and ingenuity of farmers. So this is called an iWalk 2.0, which I hope none of you have ever had to use it or know what it is. So I have a friend, he cracked the bone in his heel. He's a chiropractor that I know, and he couldn't work because you can't do it in crutches. And the scooter that you put your leg up on, you can't get close enough to the patients. So he had to come up with something. So he did some research, and he came up with, this is what he used. And so he was able to get back to work 2 or 3 months after he had his heel bone screwed together. And he thought this thing worked so good, he thought, I'm going to get the distribution rights to Canada for this thing. It was great. So he went, and he started working his way up the company ladder to see what he could do. And ultimately, he ended up talking to a dairy farmer in the Midwest who had invented this thing. And I don't know, but I can just imagine it was a guy who was working in a parlor and couldn't use crutches and couldn't use a scooter, but that would work, and I'm betting the first one had a whole bunch of plywood and baler twine and a steel stake for that post. So anyways, that was, I'm going to take a few minutes and show some benchmarking stuff. This is some stuff that we do at BDO, and lots of other organizations are doing it. And I just maybe want to start with saying the things that correlate closely with profitability. Production's up here, and I don't know exactly where benchmarking is, but it's not there. So I'm going to talk about it, but I just definitely want everyone to recognize that I acknowledge this is, if you're going to do one thing, make sure you get your production up and leave the benchmarking to somebody else. So the production is more important. And I wanted to say on this one here, I hope, as you go home today, people try to come to these meetings and take one thing home. I hope that that's not the one thing that you take home that you have to use on your farm. Okay, so what have we got here? So this is, let's see, didn't know I could do that. Okay. So we do, for BDO clients that are incorporated, that want us to do it, we do this benchmarking. So these are Ontario dairy farms that had year ends of December 31st, 2017. These are their averages in this column. So they, on average, these are farms between 100 and 125 kilograms of quota, so approximately 100 cow herds. So on average, if I talk about this in terms of $100 or 100 cows, per kilogram they had, because I'm saying they had 100 cows, they had $74,300 of crop sales, or 743 per kilogram of quota. So that's what this column is. This column, and then I've taken two farms. So this is farm 1 and farm 2. I do not know who these farms are, where they're from in Ontario, but these are Ontario farms, so that we're looking at. So if you were doing this on your own, you'd have just one of these farms in the average. This is one way of doing benchmarking. So here's a couple of things. So one is milk, so that's this column number 8. You're going to see the average is 6,600, 6,375, and 6,390. And I think on this, the way this is done, with this $6,600, keep in mind that this average in here was going to have all kinds of different producers. So you're going to have organic producers, will be an impact on this. So I'm guessing that these are probably not organic producers, or their number would be much higher. And I think in this call, all you can do if you have a kilogram of quota is make sure you use your incentive day, you fill the quota, get your incentive days, and you don't have any penalties. And that's all you can do. So that might be the case for these two guys, but they can't compare with somebody that's bumped this average up that has organic production. You can see immediately that sometimes comparing your farm to an average is difficult. So this farm, for example, you can see in farm 1 has about $20,000 more crop sales. So there's more emphasis on crops than the other two operations. This one's a lot less. And this one has a lot of livestock sales. I'm not sure why. Do they buy and sell heifers? Do they have an extra feed opportunity? But so those are the kinds of things I'm going to pick out of that section. Oh, just one other thing. It's interesting to me. I sold crop insurance for a while. When I started farming, that was an idea to try and keep making money on the farm. I didn't enjoy it and didn't do it for very long. Everybody that I talked to did not like crop insurance. If you ask them, and if I asked the room here, I would guess everybody would say, I don't like crop insurance. And we've only got, out of this average, only $800 of revenue. If I just scoot down here a little bit, you'll see that they only paid $500 in premium. So that's not very many producers. So I sold crop insurance, and 19 out of 20 producers, or whatever the number was, got more money out of crop insurance than what they paid in premiums over a period of time. But most producers don't like it. So anyways, it's always a producer's choice whether they want to have crop insurance or not. So you get down in here, again, this is cost of sales. And this going line by line, as I say it, is kind of difficult to compare one farm with another. So for example, here, I'm not sure why we have veterinary and breeding supplies is 1/3 of the average on this farm. Maybe one of the producers is, or one of the partners is a vet, I'm not sure. It's a big change in inventory, and that's gonna have something to do with that livestock sales up above. Here's a number that I like, that I think is more valuable, to look at a gross margin, because that's gonna be more comparative, not only, because you don't get that line by line connection. You get this sort of global effect from the financial statement items. We're getting down in here to some more items to see what's different between farm and an average farm 2. A lot more custom work, a lot more fuel in this farm 1 that's doing more cash crop. And I have no idea, why do they only have $300 in salaries and wages? Did they pay by dividend? I don't know. There's some tax planning. I'm not sure. So sometimes it can be very odd. If you're sitting down with the client, you know exactly what happened. But in this case, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about any of the items here. So we're getting down to the bottom row here, and you can start to see where there's a major impact on the financial report. So this one here is amortization. And you may argue that it's not a real cash cost. You're correct, but there is a real cost to amortization, and there's going to be some principal payments or something that is causing this amortization to be so high. So when we get down to the bottom, that has a big impact. The interest between these two farms is pretty similar, but they're both have more debt than the average. So we get down to the bottom here. We've got, on average, so that's $138,000 income before taxes. We've got a loss here on farm 1, and we've got about half or a third of this amount in income. So you can make some of the, and then you could go back up and see what some of the changes are. So that's one way of doing benchmarking. And I'm just going to slip over to another spreadsheet. Okay, so that was comparing yourself to an average. And what I'm going to show now is this is comparing yourself to yourself and doing it in 2 different ways. So this, this is Farm A. So this is the same farm, Farm A and Farm A. 2017 is there, and 2017 is there, it's in blue. And 2016 and 2016, so black and blue. This is what happened on this farm. They went from 102 kilograms to 109, and from 90 cows to 95 cows from 16 to 17 on both sides. So the only difference between the analysis is this one in blue is done on a per cow basis, and this one in black is done the same as the previous example on a per kilogram basis. Okay, so we can go down, and one of the things you notice immediately compared to the other one is when you're comparing to yourself, if there's differences in accounting or your operation, at least it's consistent. So you don't see that sort of differences in crop versus livestock. So on a per cow basis, one of the things I highlighted here was livestock sales. Went down for some reason from one year to another. That's what you're going to talk to that producer about, what's going on. And it gets highlighted again in this increase in inventory. When you're looking at comparing yourself to yourself, you can see some of these things like why did custom work and dairy supplies go way up? So that sort of highlights, may not compare to the average as much, but it will when you're looking at your own stuff. Sometimes you get some expenses that aren't really, they're just a one-time expense. So in this farm here in 2016, they spent about $108,000 on tile drainage, and then the next year hardly any. So you want to normalize or take those out because that's not going to happen every year. So then going back down then to the bottom of this farm, so they went from making about $97,400 to $84,900. So, and I don't know about how you guys think about this sort of stuff. I have a preference, just because it's just the way I think, is I like to see the per cow analysis. And that's just, I think you can do it either way. It doesn't matter. The analysis will be correct. But that's my preference, is to look at that. And the other comment that I would have about benchmarking, because to me, these numbers here, these are the two most, from our analysis, when we look at the Kansas State study and we look at the Ontario study, those two numbers are the most important numbers here because that's the production. We got $7,600 per cow, we got $7,200 per cow. That's the number that you want to increase that's going to make the biggest difference in your profitability, and yet there's all those other numbers that can cloud the situation if you're focusing on costs instead of improving your production, the production of your herd. So that's enough of that. Okay, so I'm wrapping up here. So Lori, just to be warned, I think I did go along here quicker than I thought I would. In summary, increased production, I think, and I guess I think I'm not going to not acknowledge that there are significant challenges coming in the industry with the new NAFTA or whatever you want to call it, and the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. All of those things are big impacts, but I think that the solution is in your hands still, and the solution is to improve your production, and to you're still going to control your costs, ensure you can do things properly and in a timely fashion, and as a secondary thing, compare yourself to other producers and set goals and plans for the future. So I thank you for your time, and I hope that you have some benefit from the presentation that I've made. Thank you.
Some questions? Not working? Nope.
We'll just look for hands.
Questions?
You talked a lot about how increasing production will increase your bottom line, but is there a point where people try and overproduce to a point where it costs so much to get that extra few liters?
Yeah, I don't know what that point is, but as time goes along, production has constantly improved, and I know that I could, if I look back to my time as a farmer, I would have made some mistakes, trying to chase production in terms of buying feedstuffs that really weren't proven to be to the advantage. And I'm not saying don't spend money on feed. I'm not saying that, but there were absolutely things that I did that that weren't valuable. It cost more than what I got a benefit. So I don't know what that number is where you should stop.
Neil, we participate in this, but we do run a lot of cash crop, and for us, the numbers that the purchase, the feed sales is we sell more than we feed our cows. So I know I've talked to my accountant about it, and he says basically you got to go through and try and pull those numbers out before you can get some.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with your accountant who that if you could separate the two of them, that'd be best.
No, some of these will include cash croppers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Likely, because I know our numbers.
Okay,
Yeah.
so these ones won't. These ones will be, the ones I've given here are, well, they're only, I would say they at least are dairy farmers. There's no one in here who is cash crop only. So there'll be an add-on. Absolutely, partly cash croppers, yep.
I'll just make a comment too that Neil's presentation is on the registration table. It was supposed to be handed out, but we forgot. So it's on the table on your way out, and so you can have a copy of it if you need be. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Is this on here? No. Mic working? Nope. Is it?
Well, you know what? I'll just use my booming voice that I was provided with.
Is it? Nope.
So we're going to go to break. Even though it seems like we just came from a break. But. So our break is sponsored by Royal Bank, and cheese is supplied by Gailey Foods. Looks like we're in for roughly a 45-minute break-ish? No?
We're back.
Oh, sorry, 15-minute break. Yeah, jumped the line there. Yep. Make sure you visit the trade show, folks, and we'll see you back in 15 minutes. I would assume the door prizes are probably at the door. Saying it as you read it for the first time.
are you?
Good, how are you? Get over the royal, all right?
No. I was ill for like a month.
Oh, were you really?
Oh, I caught something down there and I took it home and
Oh,
I felt like shit.
the last few years I haven't been bad at all. I don't know why, but.
I don't know what it was. But I caught it the first week when we were down with the paddle.
Oh, yeah,
Like
yeah.
I felt like shit at the sheep show.
Oh, that's right.
I didn't even want to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I knew there was something off. Especially the sheep barn, it's a little warmer though, and
It's
you know,
low ceiling and yeah,
it's
no.
good for sleep, but
Yeah.
probably not as good for health-wise.
But anyway, finally got over it. But oh, I felt like shit.
We should give a free, I don't know what, echinacea pills or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Your answer.
Or maybe we should just sleep more and not drink as
Oh, maybe
much.
that's fine.
And maybe eat from. No, I don't know.
this thing gonna work? Hello, 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 or not? Hey, Lindsay. Yes, I am. All of a sudden. Hello, hello. Hey, folks. We're gonna get rolling in a couple minutes here, so we'll ask you to get to your seat and maybe quiet down a bit. Thanks.
Josh? How you doing? Doing all right. Who's speaking first? Okay, I'll put this on.
Okay, folks, 1 minute till we roll here, so please grab your seat.
No, you can talk.
You turn it on.
Yeah, I'll turn it on up here.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Grab one before. I didn't want to grab something. Intro for Lindsay at all? Or are you going to do your own?
I don't need one. Do I need one?
Industry
just say,
liaison?
yeah, just say industry liaison. It's
Okay.
CDN. Yeah, that's
Something
enough.
like that.
Extension rule, something like that.
The last time we introduced, the more time she had.
Yeah.
The way you think.
Yeah.
I really don't want it.
No. Yeah.
Okay, if everybody could grab a seat and at the very least quiet down so we can respectfully listen to our speakers. So we're going to get underway with the genomic talk and an industry panel, or industry producer panel. So Lindsay Beavers is going to do the bit of an overview. There might be some. Again, if everybody could at least quiet down so we can listen up. Lindsay Beavers here from CDN is going to give an overview on genomics before we get into our panel. Lindsay?
Thank you. Okay. My mic all set? I'm good. Okay. I'm going to give you a really quick overview on genomics today. I was told 10 minutes absolute max, and I thought that was maybe a mistake, so I emailed Lori and wrote back and said, are you sure 10 minutes? Like, this is really difficult to do. So I'm going to show you just very high level snapshot of genomics and then get to the people I know you really want to hear from, which is the producers behind me. So I've been learning about this subject for 9 years, and we could talk about it for hours and days, but this is just a very quick 10 minutes. So a quick snapshot of what's going on with genomics in Canada. I realize this graph might be a little bit hard to see at the back of the room, so I'll spell out what's happening here, but really the yellow is showing progeny-proven bull usage, and the green is showing genomic young sire usage just over time. So these are across the bottom are years. And basically what's just happening in this graph is with each passing year, more and more of the females born in Canada are sired by genomic young sires. So right now we're almost at 70% of the females sired by genomic young bulls in Canada. And when we flip and look at the female side of things, when we look at how many females were genotyped in 2017 in Canada, it was about 40,000 of the Holstein females that were in the herd book. So that ends up being about 13% of registered animals are being genotyped now. So that's a level that's on the rise, but maybe not increasing quite as quickly as we thought it would, and expect that will change in the next couple years and continue to rise. So some quick benefits of genomics. The first of which, the most obvious you've all heard of, is that it has increased the rate of genetic progress substantially. And we quote often over 2 times, even some places you'll see more than that. We've more than doubled the rate of genetic progress. So this graph here is just showing genetic progress in females for LPI and ProDollars, our 2 national indexes. ProDollars in red and LPI in blue. They follow really, really closely there. And really the only main thing I want to point out here is that in 2009 when genomics came out, you see this like shift in trajectory, it changes, and that's showing that doubling of genetic progress that we're experiencing thanks to genomics. Another huge benefit of genomics has been the increase in reliability of genetic evaluations. So before genomics, when we had a parent average on an animal, say for LPI, the reliability would be about 35%. So reliability is a measure of confidence, how much confidence do we have in that number and the animal's genetic potential. So before genomics, we'd have about a reliability of 35%, and now with genomics, reliability for LPI would be close to 70. So we are much more confident in our ability to predict the genetic potential of an animal. How does one go about testing? So there used to be 3 options. There used to be also a nasal swab, but now there's just hair samples or a tissue sampling unit, which is like an ear notch that goes in a container like this. So there's a variety of ways to test. There's testing through Holstein Canada, where you go online and print out a request form by animal. There's now a lot of people that are working with AI companies that are helping them facilitate testing and offering services that help interpret the data you get back, which has increased the usage of genomic testing. Once you get the results back, after about a 3-week or longer turnaround, depending on the timing of things, you can access results either through AI if you're working with one of their programs that give you results. You can always access results on CDN website, Holstein Canada, or other breed associations as well. And the cost of genotyping went down about a year ago, and so now the cost for the panel that would be sufficient for the vast majority of producers and what you need for herd management from the genetic end is just a $33 test. It's a low density SNP panel, so some of the higher density SNP panels cost more and really are just adding extra tests for recessives and different things like POLD or so it's this $33 test is really the one that's sufficient for most people to use. So when should a producer test and analyze their results? Well, this is really what works best with your management system. But there's a couple logical times that make sense to test. I've heard some people say, to me it's just easy to test every calf at birth because it's just part of our SOP with processing a new calf. We just do the ear notch right when we're giving her a tag or whatever. So it's just simple. I want to test everybody and I don't have to think about it too much. If you want to be a little bit more careful with your $33 per animal, then people will maybe look at the parent average of the calf and say, okay, this is what her parent average is, and where does she fall within a group of heifers, and say if she's under or over a certain parent average, say for LPI, they would decide to spend the money or not, depending on their situation and their herd strategy. But the important thing with a genomic test is that it carries on with your animal for her entire life. So you pay that $33 once, but the genomic evaluation stays with her forever. So as she adds performance data into her evaluation, it's reinforcing that genetic prediction, but you're going to have it every time you go mate her. You're going to have a better number than had you have just used the parent average alone. So what criteria should you be looking at when you genomic test, or I guess you could say when you're looking at genetics in general? I'm a big promoter of indexes, and I think indexes are combining all of the important traits. They're giving you that one-stop shop number where you can be sure you're incorporating production, fertility, health traits, and functional conformation. And there's two national indexes here, different goals should be available if you're looking to use LPI or you're looking to use ProDollars. Those indexes satisfy kind of a different type of producer. ProDollars is more of a production-focused health and fertility index that sustains a level of functional conformation to keep production high. And LPI is more of our national Canadian flag index that is recognized around the world and does a good job at production, conformation, and health traits too. But it's definitely more of the marketing tool index. And so what you want to do, like I said, is pick an index that works best for you and perhaps set a threshold based on your heifer's parent averages and say, should I be testing this one because she's reached a certain threshold or not? And if you're using genomic parent averages on females, of course it's important to not forget the real deal. If you're looking at a piece of paper and you see a very high animal, but you go in the barn and realize she had a terrible bout of pneumonia, she's not going to live up to her genetic potential in the future. And so we never want to forget about that too. So the four main reasons for genomic testing heifers are outlined here, and I'll just go through each of them really quick, and then I'm pretty well done. And I imagine the producers will go over some of these things as well. But the first main benefit of genomic testing heifers is that genomic parent average is superior to parent average for heifer selection. So I've already mentioned the increase in reliability went from about 35 up to almost 70. So we know with much more accuracy who are going to be the better replacements in the future when you're using a genomic parent average versus a parent average alone. The second benefit there is management of genetic recessives. So some of the ones we want to avoid, like some of the haplotypes affecting fertility, some recessives like CVM. When you test an animal, you get results on many recessives, and you know for sure whether they carry them or not. So that is definitely a benefit. It can also tell you some of the positive recessives like POLD and that sort of thing too, whether they're carriers of that. And number three, more accurate heifer mating. So like I said, you have a genomic evaluation that stays with the female for her whole life. So if you have an evaluation on a young calf, it's going to help you make the first breeding decision more accurately, but also every breeding decision throughout the rest of her life. And lastly, but maybe most importantly, heifer genomic parent average better predicts future cow performance. So if you look at parent average and future performance, there would be a relationship there. So think of a trait like milk. The higher the parent average for milk, the higher in general we would expect milk production to be for a given animal. But that relationship between genetics and performance is even stronger when you're looking at genomic parent averages compared to parent averages alone. And ultimately, the main reason to genomic test heifers is to become more efficient. So in that sense, perhaps it will allow you to raise fewer heifers to only keep the best for creating the next generation. And so ultimately, some take-home messages. We've really increased the rate of genetic progress with genomics. We have seen that genomic young sire usage is really widespread and is improving genetics on all farms, but it's only kind of starting to happen more and more on the female side. But the young sire side has really been beneficial to everyone. More than ever, genomic testing heifers, it's being considered as a strategy for herd management, so especially in an environment where we can't keep expanding and expanding. If you're raising enough heifers, it's a strategy to remove and only keep the ones that you need for your replacements. And ultimately, as well, for well-managed herds, it's a tool to bump you up to the next level of performance. So perhaps it's not something that every herd would be employing, or it's maybe at different times. You know, you're going through a bad calf mortality problem, or you're having trouble keeping up your replacements, and it's perhaps not a strategy that fits at that moment. But for well-managed herds, it's going to be something that can take you to the next level. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off now to our first producer, Wayne.
You ready? So I'm pretty loud normally, and I'm a preacher at times too, so I'll try to stick to the program here. If you wonder why I'm wearing a cane, 6 weeks ago I got a full ankle replacement. I have 2 hips as well, and so I hope when I get my progeny proof in about 50 years from now that it shows up that that gene didn't carry on through. But they don't genomic test us yet for that kind of stuff. So I've asked Lori if she would advance the slides for me, because I'm a hand talker and I got a cane too. So if you fall asleep, I'll wake you up. So I come from Clainook Farms, and the opinions I'm giving I own for myself, not necessarily the other partners at Clainook. Sometimes we disagree, but we all advance together. So you can see where we are. I might want to make one point there. We're 3 generations have been in ownership. The 4th generation is already working part-time on the farm as well, and gets paid for doing so. This is the most important DNA on the farm. That's Mary, my wife Mary is here in the cow sweater, and that's our family, most of them anyhow. So we crop 340 hectares. I don't know if you do acres here or not, but it's 800 some acres. We have 200 cows, including the dry cows. We have 400 young cattle, and we have about 70 bulls on farm at all time. We have a tie stall barn with 183 tie stalls, and I recognize some of you have already been there to visit us. We milk with 14 units, 3 people milk. So I want to get through what we do on our farm to get to the pitfalls and challenges, because I think that's the most important part of the presentation. Our objectives with genomics was to stay on the leading edge of genomics, and we sell a lot of bulls and embryos worldwide, and so we wanted to know if we have the stuff or if we don't. And if we don't, we wanted to play that game So if we didn't have it, we wanted to know what we had to buy. And so we've spent some money over the years, and it's almost always worked out. It seems the more we spent, it was synergistically positive on the plus side. The access of genomics, we do this with CDN and Holstein Canada. We do the LPI, and the confirmation is really important for us for the LPI. We trust the LPI confirmation numbers better than any system worldwide, and basically because of the data collection with that. We look at ProDollars. RZG is the German system. So that and the TPI are some of the most important ones in the world. Net Merit is gaining a lot of importance. That's another U.S. system. And then we also test hair samples in a lot of other countries in the world that they come and test. We send them hair and they test it. We've been in this game since inception. We've done the index long before that, and it's been lucrative for us. We test 80% of the females on the barn. Any female that doesn't have a chance of entering sons into AI, we don't bother testing. We also test 70% of the males born on our farm. Of those males, over the last 5 years, we've averaged over 20 per year going into AI, and last year it was over 30. The impacts on our herd, we definitely have higher confirmation. We have some 31 excellents, and there's quite a few over 100 very good. There's some good plus too. And we have a couple of good cows, and the reason why, they have genomics that are high for production, and they show it. So my son who is 35, 38 years old, he has this thing that when the cow really produces, she kind of looks better. When an excellent cow doesn't work, she kind of looks ugly in a hurry. So that's somewhat different than the next generation from me. So better conception as well. We have definitely seen that in our herd, that the conception in our herd versus a number of years back is getting better. And we have used exclusively genomic young sires in our herd. I'm not necessarily making a proponent of that everywhere, but we have used that in our herd ever since Winbrook came around. Do you know who Winbrook was? So now, the pitfalls of genomics. I'm not so sure they're pitfalls as they are challenges. And we need to identify the recessive genes and the halotypes. And apparently there's 31 halotypes already that are identified. I'm sure they're going to find more, right? We need to find those out. We need to find all the recessive traits out. So just to make a better breed. And part of it, to me, the concern is we have an almighty big concern in our breed nowadays about inbreeding. I mean, some people want 6%, some 9%. I couldn't give a rip what it is. I say the higher better to fix the homozygous genes in the animals. But collect the data. Data collection is paramount, right? And I'm going to stress this big time here because our sales of the offspring that we have on farm, and I'm sure all of it in this room, we can sell really good heifers now for $800 to $2,000, right? Fresh, good looking stuff. So people say, why should we milk record and why should we collect data? Well, I'll tell you later why. But we need to really stay abreast of that. And I think we have tipped the tipping point away from inbreeding way too much. The good bulls of the past have almost always been inbred multiple times because they make a real dent in the population because they have homozygously fixed the genes in them that they don't manifest the bad genes. And getting back to that also on our data, our collection of the different index systems, we find when animals measure up well on multiple indexes, they have fewer bad genes in them. If they can only measure up on one index, they got genes in there that don't measure up well worldwide. So now the wide range of genetic probabilities. Most people, when they use genomic young sires, they see the proof, they think they're going to get that. Well, if it's a 70% probability, 70% of the time you're going to get a plus-minus range like milk. I'm not even sure what it is anymore. I tried to find the data anymore, but it's old data. But it was like 750 kilos, plus or minus. right? That's 1,500 kilos difference that bull can be, and still the genomics can be correct. So there's a wide variability. Fat and protein, they're some of the best genomic indicators, but the bull will never be what he says he is. He might be plus or minus of that on all different kinds of traits. So remember that. So don't get too hard on a bull if he isn't exactly what he was when he was not. With rollbacks and everything, it changes quite a bit. But there's quite a variance within genomics. The difference between country formulas, it's really hard to compare. It almost doesn't. Now, net merit, pro dollars, and RZG are getting kind of close. Right? That's the German system, the US system, and our pro dollar system. I have a real issue with the net merit because it doesn't use any type at all, and it almost tends to be a single trait selection type of thing then. Lest we forget, type is still important. Now, I should say confirmation more than type, because type tends to be an elitism language, right? And we're definitely commercial in our herd. And it's confirmation. We need a squatter, ruggeder animal. I think we can all agree on that. Now, long-term data collection and epigenetics and gamma genetics go hand in hand. Epigenetics is how they have found, and I'm using layman terms if it's okay, because that's all I am. I'm not a scientist, but I'm an observational student of the game, right? Epigenetics is how the environment interacts with the embryo in the uterus to turn DNA on and off, right? Gamma genetics, is they are learning this recently, is how when you put an embryo in a surrogate mother's uterus, it appears, I'm saying appears, that the DNA in the host animal communicates on some level with the DNA in the embryo to turn DNA on and off, right? So Jarek and Jordan were bulls that were a split embryo, but there was an epigenetic effect happening in uterine that they actually manifested their proofs differently, right? So what I'm saying that if we don't collect data long term on all levels, confirmation, daughter fertility, all these things, right? If we don't collect that data long term, within 3 generations, it's highly probable we won't know what we have anymore, right? Now, this is a probability talk, too, because we don't really know for sure how much of this passes on to the next generations. And anybody that uses absolute language on this stuff, that's not appropriate. So that's why I say it appears. It appears that in three generations, we won't know what we have anymore, right? So, having said that, it's an exciting game. It's a game that's been very, very useful for us at Kleinook Farms. It's made us some money. We've spent some money, and we have fun doing it, and hopefully we can do it for several more generations. So thank you very much for your attentiveness.
Just, you hear me? Nope. Okay, thanks for inviting me. First, I'm going to say we're not as elite as the Kleinook there. We're just a regular commercial dairy farm. We're in Peel County. We've been on our home farm since 1869. So my son is the 7th generation on the farm, and his son, which is 15 months old, is 8th generation. Hopefully it'll continue. Got 4 partners in our farm. My son is beside me there, and Richard, and he graduated from University of Guelph and worked for us for 2 years, and then we decided we'd let him buy in. And then my brother Peter, and then his son Lucas, he graduated from University Waterloo, worked in Toronto for a few years, and then we let him work for us for 2 years before we decided we'd let him join too. So the 4 of us there are managing the farm. So we're milking about 375 cows with dry cows, about 300 replacements, too many replacements right at this point in time. The cows seem to all, I think the sex semen went into the regular, into the regular semen because we got all kinds of heifers this year on, with the cows. We milk 3 times a day. Right now we're averaging, between 42, 43 kilos, balance between 4.2 and 4.4 butter fat, around 3.5 protein. Farm about 1,300 acres. Most of it's all rented. We just own our home 100 acres. Our land in our area has always been a little too expensive. We're just north of Brampton, so we're 2 miles north of Brampton. Even in 1960, it was worth $2,000 an acre, so it was expensive. Unless you had sold out below, you couldn't buy land. We have 3 full-time employees. They've been with us a long time. It'd be great. One's been with us 24 years, 18 years, and 13 years. Then we're fortunate where we live. We have 6 part-time employees. They're all new immigrants, and they just live south of us in Brampton, and they have full-time jobs. They come and they do the third milking and help on the weekends when the other guys are off. This is the main dairy barn for the milk cows. We expanded it in 15, so now we will be able to go up to about 400 cows milking when we get completely full. Heifer barn here, built in 2006. It's a self-cleaning barn. Holds the heifers from about 3 months old up till they're pregnant. So we started sex semen 11 years ago. That's when we were starting to grow. We want to expand. We're buying quota. So we got heifers only for first 3 breeds. We had a big increase in heifer population. And as we all know, the quota policy changed. So that kind of stopped our growth kind of in its tracks. So then we had a pile of heifers. What do we do with them? So in pre-genomics, we basically came in, we used the parent average, 35% accurate, went through it, called them out. If they happen to be a very good or an excellent, you might have kept 1 or 2, moved along that way. So we got to the point we go out and we look at and visually, heifers were growing really well. We couldn't really tell by visually looking at them who was better, who wasn't. And we'd even have East Gen reps come in and go over them, and they said, yep, they're all nicely looking heifers, so that didn't help. So when genomics came on and was available in our mind, we go, that's great, that's a good opportunity for us, because it certainly helped us, because we weren't able to visually see which ones were our best animals. And we didn't like the parental average, because I figured I could flip a coin and get 50%, not 35%. So we had 70% reliability. We used the nasal swabs, and then we switched. There's a nasal swab that was originally used. I guess I didn't realize they're not in use anymore. Then we switched to the tissue sample. It's really nice. The kit, you got it in the ear tags, and the genetic thing for the genetic sample is right there. It's got the management number on it and the other numbers that they need. So you just put them in a bag and send them off. We started culling heifers only on genomic LPI. It was quite simple at that time. We had a fairly large spread. It was easy to identify who was the bottom, and so we just went by the numbers. Just started culling them off. There were some exceptions that you get. You get some of those cows, older cows that were nice-looking animals, and you go, geez, we want to keep that animal around. And so you would do some exceptions. Also, there's always a cutoff point, and you have some animals that are below the point of cutoff, and you had some just over it. If you get looking too much, you can look, oh, geez, one's very good, and one was out of a fair. You might switch them up, or one had a good mammary system, one didn't. You'd switch them up and move them back and forth. Currently, everything below 2,800 is being culled on our farm. So it's narrowed up. We got the numbers have got up, and our problem is we know we're getting rid of a lot of good animals, and they are good animals, and but we can't raise everything, and we have to move them somehow. So that's our cutoff point now. Trends we're seeing, as you can see, this just took off Holstein, Canada. 2008, just before where the milk production was, where the herd is now. Now that's not all genomics. I mean, there's management, there's feed, there's a whole lot of things that go into that, but it just certainly gives you the trend. You see the butter fat, fat's up, 100 kilos there. It's more now. This is 2017 stuff. Same with protein. So you look at I should mention when we pick bulls to breed, we've never bred for production. We never look at kilos of milk. It's never been an issue for us. We've always liked plus deviation in kilos of butter fat. Never worried about protein. A lot of times that just came along with the butter fat. So as you can see, the trends along there, the last little bit, it's starting to shoot up pretty good above the averages. Same with the protein. Herd life is starting to spec. That's another one of the things we're looking at now on when we start, as we're looking at more things now. Herd life is critical to us, like herd life, daughter fertility, calving ease, those types of things. You want everything, but there's a few things you concentrate on. Health issues. Daughter fertility, you can see how that's all of a sudden taking off and improving. Calving ability, it hasn't changed a whole lot. We just look at, we want to make sure they're above average. Daughter calving ability, that's one of the things that comes through. We want to make sure that, if they have a trouble calving, if you have an animal that has a trouble calving, she's not going to do as well. They've got to be able to calve. Conformation traits, you can see, start at the bottom there, it's 2009, where we were, we're 44% good plus or higher. Very goods, we only had 2, it was just gradually improving. You can see now we're up to 76% good plus or higher, 22% very good or better. Got a few excellent, don't get too many. But so things are, you can see it's not everything with genomics, but as we're culling, we can see that the trends, we're going the proper way, and we feel good about that with our herd. So I just want to say, a lot of it's like milk testing, and I think as they were saying, if we don't all do classification, if we don't herd test, we don't have DHI, don't have those numbers, this stuff is gone. So we need all that stuff, all those aggregate things in order to make this whole thing work. So it's important that we continue to collect all the information they can, because then that gets passed on and works. So some people say, oh, geez, I don't want to spend the money on it. Think down the road, the next generation. We need to spend the money on these types of things. It certainly helps your own herd in advancing, but it helps the overall industry if we keep doing it. Thank you.
Everybody know what I am? Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gary Marcus, again from Mark Hill Holsteins. I thank the Grey Bruce Egg Committee for the opportunity to speak to you guys about genetics at Mark Hill and genomics in general. A little bit of background, Mark Hill is a shared corporation between my wife Hillary and our 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. Currently, Hillary and I hold just over 90 kilos on a 180-acre farm in southwest Oxford County. We house 140 Holsteins, 75 milking or dry, and about 65 young stock. And I include a skid steer. I'm a very proud custom farm guy. So the only piece of equipment on our farm is a skid steer. Everything else is done. I guess I got a 1978 white case tractor from my father-in-law to run the generator on those days, but outside of that, everything's done is completely external. Level 2 Holstein Canada judge, and Hillary and I are quite active in our local communities. A little bit of history about where I've been born and raised under the prefix of Markvale Holsteins, a 2-time master breeder herd. As we grew up, when we were 21 in 2007, my twin brother and I wanted to go elsewhere. Again, not necessarily go elsewhere, but get a little more involved. In September of 2007, we successfully used all the money Bank of Montreal would guide us and buy 30 kilos of quota and opened a rental agreement with a local producer in a 34-cow tie stall barn. Getting into the genetic side, in that time frame, we were still a little bit in the BSE stem time, implication time. We managed to collect 27 cows from 21 herds, averaging in $1,500 an animal at that time. Again, just we went everywhere and everywhere, dug a hole, found a cow, and took her home. part of our plan was to hold off-farm jobs. So at that time, I was working full-time as a herd manager for a 300 cow dairy near Ingersoll, and Daryl as well was off-farm as well. Allowed us to share. In that time, he was doing the morning chores. I would do the night chores for about 4 hours a day on those 30 cows. In March 2012, we moved to a two-row old tie stall barn and made it into a two-row salmon-bedded freestall barn with as cheap a barler as you can buy. Moved to TMR at that time as well. And seen our man hours dropped from 9 to 10 hours at that time per day down to just under, it's in there somewhere, just under 4 or 5. Since then, in July 2014, Daryl and I had our succession plan, which was to split, which was already the game plan from day one in 2007. Hillary and I purchased Daryl's portion of what then was Mark Ridge Farms and bought them out, which allowed them to buy a 60-kilo, 300-acre farm up by Belleville. Moving into, the genetic side, now for the last 9 years, I've worked for Alta Genetics, and I've had some interesting, learned a lot about the corporate end and how plans and stuff come together. And I think this is one of the most important things any business can have, and that's a mission statement. The first part of our mission statement, again, just nothing that any of us don't try to do, which is take care of our cows every day, the best of our ability, whatnot. But for us, the biggest part is leaving an example, an environment, an opportunity for our children to succeed in the future dairy industry. And I don't think you can start that early enough as a producer, business. The sooner you do that, again, I'm only here because I had the opportunity that my parents did that. So I think that's a lot of our goals. Again, on the corporate side, this kind of looks a little dramatic for a 90-cow dairy. But for me, something that I think, again, each level of those things, we have a plan. And I included genetics, and very few of us care, in my opinion, enough about our genetic goal as a herd and what our genetic plan is. We all have a nutrition plan or a finance plan or whatnot going forward, but how can we further take our genetic portion of our farm? And you'll notice I'm not on there. The reason I've been in sales long enough to know if I drive in fast the driveway, the success of my opportunity with that corporation is pretty low, as I didn't make the misses, or the significant other very happy probably. The other reason is I choose to be the dumbest person in the room. I think that's important to surround yourself with people that improve you. For me, if I excel in any of these above the person I work with, then I'm probably not working with the right person anymore. So this is what makes Mark Hill successful for us. And then we choose conflict over harmony within a boardroom type setting. Our herd goals today to maximize combined fat and protein production, maximizing our facility and quota holdings, using top quality digestible forage and minimizing off-farm feed inputs to maximize ROF. Here's our current herd production on a current 12,000, just over 12,000 kilos of milk with 500 kilos of fat and 400 kilos of protein. Our daily ration right there is, as you can see, is fairly high forage. I think we're rating around 79% forage. And we do that for just over $4.50 a day per cow. Getting into the genetic side, current herd averages for pro dollars for us is $13.20. The cows average 10.38, and then again, that shows a little bit of where we started as a herd back in 2007, because you don't turn it on overnight. Our heifers are $16.50. Again, in layman's terms, that for every heifer, we're going to gain $600 over our current cow. Herd classification there. Our breeding philosophy, 2 genomic bulls per proof round using a selection index of 60% production. I put a lot of emphasis on protein. Protein is our most limiting factor to profit, especially with our current FNS ratio. The other reason in protein, it's highly correlated to milk, so I'll get milk by selecting protein. The 5% on fat is basically that I don't use minus fat milk bulls or component bulls. 30% on health. The reason for that is, again, 95% of our cows leave because they're not pregnant. And 10% on udders. Udders are highly correlated, or moderately highly correlated to feet and legs. So again, I don't have to waste emphasis on feet and legs. I can breed for udders, and again, statistically speaking, which is what we're using with genetics, is largely statistics. I'll inherit or continue to breed highly or good-legged animals as well, and functional cows like the other producers led to. So our genomic plan was to completely, something again we're getting a little bit, to completely turn over our herd inventory of old genetics with high-end offspring from top females. Number 2 was to mitigate costs and the risk of purchasing high-end animals. Goal number 3 was to create a 20 offspring from each purchase, and goal number 4 was to create offspring that achieve our farm goals. So this is, if you take our herd profile right now, this is our herd profile. As you can see, it's fairly wide, which means very, very low predictability on outcomes as far as the next generation comes. Also that there's lots of room for improvement. So my lack of artistic skills put a nice little St. Louis arch in there, and that's where we want to go. We want to turn the whole herd over in under 4 years and basically take the whole graph over to the right-hand side. So over the last 2 years, we've bought 6 what we would consider high-end animals from. We've largely used Peak Genetics to establish those families. To hit goal number 2, to mitigate costs, we focused on animals that have standing contracts for embryos and whatnot. And again, that allows us to create some contacts within that industry with the goal of basically breaking even per animal on solely the embryo side. And that's given us the opportunity to sell embryos into Germany, Japan, Korea, and a couple other countries as well. So this is what this is not my herd, but an example, we're we're not far enough down the road to see where that plan is going. This is a similar herd that's doing the same thing. Is further down the road, as you can see, as they started in 2014. Basically, again, we all want to do genomics, and we want a genomic test, and the reality is the banker's going to come back and say, hey, how do we pay for this? So if you look at the blue line is this herd's current, if they did not do any purchasing outside of high-end animals or semen, high-end semen, or anything. That's our herd trend for every animal within the herd going forward. And then the top graphs there, don't mind the noise in the top graph, as it was a low number of animals as far as the impact over year to year. But the number we want to focus on is the $116, or combined fat and kilos of protein, and their current herd of 103.4 kilos of protein, of combined fat and protein. So that's a CDN number. So if we use that number, genetically speaking, the difference between where they were going at 103.4 and an upward trajectory, this is genomics, heavier influence of genomics coming in. This is the trend, and then as they continue to add influence from the animals they purchased, we see a transfer from, or impact, I guess, from these new animals on the new herd trend. So the difference between the old and the new is 12.9 kilos of combined fat and protein, and I just threw in a gross, what we got last month for per kilo of butter, fat, and protein of $20. So that's an average of $258 per animal. So again, that's over the 5-year lifetime, or CDN, or PD, or 3 lactations per animal on CDN. So that's where we're going to try and cash flow this. And again, going back to, we have to do as much as we can to make sure that that animal makes that. So usually that guy has a last name, and it's Gary Marcus, as to why that heifer doesn't make her genetic potential. But that's our goal, and that's how we're going to cash flow that. So going back to this one, some might ask, well, why didn't you pick a handful of these heifers or animals to select from your own herd and not take out in-house instead of going back and purchasing outside? The overall effect is still the same, it just slows the investment return. So we chose to go spend some money. I will agree with Wayne, the more you spend, the more that pays back, which is easy to say because you have to spend it first, but the reality is it 100% is true. So yeah, there's one aspect of how genetics pays going forward. Again, genetics, you get what you breed for. So this is just a couple examples. Again, I can't show you my in-herd, it's too early, but the reality is we could show you thousands of these similar reports that compare top to bottom herd within herds. You know, the top one is DPR, not or similar to daughter fertility, but the expression in preg rate is outstanding compared to what you would do. And if we're looking for different things to do, herd life or productive life, again, the difference between top and low groups within herds is quite impactful when we look at a large part of our operation is management hours dealing with these kinds of cows. So some suggestions for you, I guess, trying to implement these things. I think you got to keep in mind that genetics is the last thing to express within the management pyramid. We can do a whole lot wrong to a heifer, and we can do a genomic test, spend the $30 or $33 to do a genomic test. But if I skip a feeding or skip a treatment on a calf, that $50 doesn't do a whole lot for me. We're 80%. If we don't get that average daily gain into those calves, genomic test is just a bill because it's not going to express itself until we have that all kind of cleared up and run top-notch facilities. So with that, average manage your health and calf records. Know your daily gain. I believe the number is 800 grams. If the calf doesn't make 800 grams, the chance of her meeting her genetic potential is less than 60%. So if we don't manage that first, again, we're not going to get the expression or, more importantly, the return on our investment of genetics. For what I see, again, just working on the field a little bit as well, stick to a plan, jump in with both feet. Walking on both sides of the line or dabbling only slows your return on investment and clouds the results, no different than trying to throw BMR every other row. Well, did it do something? Did it not do something? Well, who knows? Jump in. We're also not reinventing the wheel by saying our top animals are in our calf pens. They should always be in our calf pens. If they're not, we're breeding backwards, and we've got to keep that in mind. And if you are going to genomic test, which I am an advocate for, use the data. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, money, and it's a fun. Otherwise, like I said, it's just a fun bill.
So we'll get the chairs up top. Give Wayne a hand. They can have the lights on, please.
Two chairs here.
I just want to say one thing before we get started. I didn't like one thing Phil said. He called me not doing a lead breeder, and that's elitism language. We are just commercial as anybody else. We make money differently. Oh yeah, we're good. I don't want him to think we're better than he is.
Questions, I'll come to you, please. The way a panel works is you have to ask questions.
I'd just like to know if you all know your cost of production every day for your herd.
Switch on it.
Hello? Hello? Do I know my cost of production every day? No, I don't do it. I don't do it every day. We'll go through and we'll look at it at least monthly. We'll look at where we're at on cost of production. For the total herd, if we look at, and I'm going to put on debt and interest and everything like that, it's about 52 cents a liter.
We never do it. And the reason we don't do it, we look at, are we making money, and we're making lots of money, and if we're not, then we will go and do that. But we don't, we think it's, for us, it's a waste of time. That's not our interest. Our interest is in generating revenue and controlling costs, and we don't, it works for us, not saying it works for everybody.
I don't have it on, on the production end, it's 34 cents a day, or a cow, sorry, or a liter, sorry.
our situation, I work off farm for the sake of growing. So I consider this kind of dollar on the top. Both my quota growth facility updates. So for us, it's going to be high, but I don't have the exact number. I do know that production side is 34 cents. Again, we're trying to get somewhere, and today for us that means having an off-farm job. And so yeah, our expense ratio is going to be high because there's a ton of gas production.
I have a question here.
During both Wayne and Philip's presentation, they both touched on the need for classification and DHI recording. Right now, there's a strong movement in the industry away from both of those things, with more computerized recording on robots and less people classifying. Basically, I'm just wondering what your take is on including more of the actual cow data into the set, rather than just sticking with 2-year-old information as far as confirmation scores and productions.
I don't have an expert opinion on, just 2-year-old stuff, but it's incredibly important for genomics to have the data. We need to have classification. We have to get it somehow. If somebody doesn't want to do it, I don't know how we try to encourage everyone to do it. I don't know why some people don't do it, because I think it's fun. It's interesting to see where your herd's at. And certain production data, I know, we've got all the computerized systems, you've got all that data there, but it's nice we have to realize if we want a future in Holsteins or in the dairy industry, we're going to have to, as a collective, share that information. Otherwise, in 10 years, it'll mean nothing.
This might take me a while because I thought somebody might ask about the data question. The data question is a bit alarming because of what I said about the epigenetics and gamma, but it's also alarming because of the fact that some big global companies are paying to get hair samples or ear snips and stuff, and data is control, leverage, and futuristic setting in our culture, right? And that's where the money is. And some of these companies are going to dictate to us if we don't collect our own data, and they don't give it liberally and freely what it is all about, right? So classification, milk reporting isn't the only data. I think we should use whatever data. I think we should use more hoof trimming data and all this kind of data, right? But we should have a centralized location, and I believe it should come off our milk check. I think we should have control over that data as producers all the way across, right? It should be, my perspective, we should have a benevolent dictator here. And we should say, you're all going to participate because you're all getting a milk check. And we should collect more data and assimilate it all. I don't care where it comes from. We can differentiate if it's really collected well. We can differentiate, put different weighting on it and that kind of thing. Let the scientists do their math, humble jumble, right? But we need to have it. It's non-negotiable. We'll either lose our genetic progress or the veracity thereof, or we will lose control and we'll become like the pigs in the chicken industry, where it'll get so centralized. And if I might say something else, we have a mission statement at our church, and it's really arrogant, right? We believe God put us on this earth for a purpose, and to whom much is given is much required. We feel we have the potential at Kleinoch that by the time we're done, we can have a Kleinoch Holstein cross in every animal in the world. And because we were living here, the world can be a better place nutritionally. That's part of our goal. And I unabashedly say that because it's possible, right? And so there's got to be a raison d'etre, a reason for being.
I guess just to get back to your a little bit more question specifically as far as data goes, the reality is I think we do need to improve our data collection side, modernize it. Does that mean, taking some from a robot, for example, taking some of the average or one the average? We've been working in absolutes as far as I need to know that absolute day what you need for production. The reality is, it's tricky because everybody, every system has people that try and fix the system outside the system or within the system, and that hurts us all. But the reality is, down the road, they're all chicken So, to answer that question, it's not quite as simple as saying, yeah, everybody has to be a child, all those things. We definitely need those, and we need those to stay a high percentage of implementation. The reality is we all live in a bank world where the bank wants to money everyone. So, I've seen clientele that, I just don't have the money to pay that this month. So how does that go? Well, it's $1,000 here, $1,000 there. And some uninsured, plenty of the trades in this room over the last couple of years, nothing more has come up than the area accounts receivable within all these trades that are in this room as well. We've seen that in our business, we've seen that personally, like, as far as Mark Nicholson is concerned. So it's not as simple as saying, you have to do this. Bottom line, that brings us to good and bad first. That's the first guy coming. But absolutely, again, we do need the data to manage the next generation. As far as the cows, the 2-year-olds comment, I had a little bit, I think we need to maximize per stall over per cow. And one reason I say that is you can have longevity or profitability without longevity, but you never have longevity without profitability. So if your farm is 100 cows or 100 stalls, and your barn, and you can't do anything but milk one less cow, the cow getting the least to that day's milk tank is going to go. Whether she's 5, whether she's 1 or 2, or whether she's 10. And a little bit of the industry is gone from the standpoint of saying, I got to sell that cow whenever she doesn't make from it. The problem is we sell a lot of cows on the worst day and not on the best day. So I have a high turnover on mine, that's because I don't get a cow after 180 days. And the reality is, I want to sell her when she's worth $1 a pound. I want to sell her when she's worth 60 cents, 40 cents, not when I have to grade up with a check for $70.
I can give a few comments just from an industry perspective. I just wanted to clarify your question about 2-year-olds. Was that in reference to genetic evaluations or? Yeah. Okay. So I think what you're asking, a lot of you use more than 2-year-olds for things like purple groups for plastic. Right. Okay. Right. So just to answer that first aspect of the question with the 2-year-olds, the reason that only 2-year-old data for classification is used for confirmation is there's a few reasons, but it's because all 2-year-olds are scored, and so it's the only way we can have an unbiased genetic evaluation. So the only way we could ever use all classifications is if we continue to score all cows, and cows have the ability to go down as well as up, because in our system, cows can only classify and go up. Important to the future success of, how genomics will stick around and continue to be accurate in the future. There's hertz dropping off of programs, but genomics are still working really well. Gary kind of alluded to this. We need, but they still work without 100%. And what you'll see in the future, like we mentioned with hoof health, is certain traits where data is coming only perhaps from certain farms or from certain hoof turners or from a certain aspect of the industry where we formed a partnership and figured out a way to compensate producers and compensate those data collectors and create new traits that fuel genomics into the future. So data collection is really important, but the reality is we don't need 100% of all groups on everything to make genomics work. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on is for some of those herds that are dropping off for costs and that sort of thing, or feeling like they get enough from their on-prem systems, there are programs in the works at Milk Reporting and through partnerships forming with CBN to add value to those customers, perhaps on robotic systems or that have a lot of on-farm data, to make sure that they want to participate. Of course, those things never happen as fast as anybody would like, but there's a lot in the works behind the scenes.
Question here.
Thank you for sharing. My question is, with respect to selecting animals for genetic testing, there was mention of 70% of bulls on farm and 80% of heifers. How do you go about selecting that animal for testing, and which animals are not selected?
We test all females. When they're born, we tag them. We take the genetic the tissue sample, and it's sent away. So we test all our animals. It's the simplest way for us. Works into we get the data back, and then we can decide who we're going to call, and we'll call them before we breed them.
If they don't have a parent average high enough to even consider going into bull the I unit, they're not getting tested on our farm. But that's just where we draw the line. Everything is a recipient on our farm. A lot of the cows are actually recipients, and even some of the heifers we flush. Once they're flushed 3 or 4 or 5, 6 times, they get an embryo. So now, Gamba Genetics, Brian Van Dormel told me years ago, Wayne, it would be best served if you put your best DNA embryos in your best DNA recipients and feed them well. So you can select for genomics. If you don't feed your heifers properly, including an article in some of the magazines lately about how feeding calves and turning DNA on off and the epigenetics happens as young calves, we've only scratched the surface of this stuff of what we know. You will not even bulls producing semen and stuff. If they're not fed properly, we're not sure what happens. So you got to do everything well. I want to have one point, calving ease, for instance. There's that. Calving ease is almost all gestation length. We think it should be linear, where 100% is maybe 276 days or whatever. That should be the optimum. Anything less than that is the low, and anything above that is high. Just like legs and feet and rump angle and all that stuff, right? Because we've doubled up on Oman blood, and the cows didn't hardly make any milk, and the calves in the dry cow pen before their due date by a country mile. And the calves were unthrifty because they were almost premature. So we like to be students of the game and see what's happening before the scientists get around, but they need to fix it faster, right?
So I think you got, to answer your question, it depends what your goals are again. If your goals herd improvement, so just looking at the 3 people in the front of the room here, I put my herd profile up. My herd by far is the lowest genetic herd based on where it came from. So that means I can blame everybody else because I bought them from 21 different farms. But long and the short is that within my herd, if I'm going to genomically test the top end of my herd, and like Wayne said, if your expectation is to take the top end of my herd and put her in, shoot for the stars and say I'm going to call up whoever and see if they want to sign this bull calf to that's just not realistic. you gotta spend money to stay in that game. From a herd in improvement standpoint, from where my example is of what we're trying to do, I'm wasting every dollar I have genomically testing every animal on my farm, outside of the ones that I've invested in and the offspring that come out of that, for the sole purpose of finding, so say the heifer, our goal is to make 20 offspring from every purchased animal. Taking those 20, doing the genomic tests on those animals, absolutely paramount, because I have to identify which animal out of those 20 is the next flush heifer. But we're talking about 20 that are within 30 points LPI per dollars, whatever you want. Then you get into Phil's situation where all of a sudden now my heifers range from 3,300 LPI to 2,800 LPI. Now I can reasonably see that if I do a genomic test, I might get a heifer go from 2,900 to 3,100 and get her in from the bottom 65% to the top 25%. That can reasonably happen. When you have again, similar, which I'm going to go on a limb and say that the large majority of this room have a wide herd profile, top to bottom within herd. So, again, it comes down to what your expectation is with that, and you got to live in reality. And then, you know, but again, if you get to the point where Armstrong Manor is, where you're, again, that heifer profile, every heifer's the same, well then yet now we're talking, you know, genetics matter as far as who am I going to breed beef, or who am I going to put an embryo in, or who am I going to call, you know, and then I can add things like daily gain and so on and so forth to those equations. You know, that heifer looked at me funny, I'm gonna, you know, she's good, she's gone. The reality is, it matters then. You know, at my level, where my herd is, as my cow herd, it doesn't matter. So that you got to know where you are, and otherwise you're just going to get a bill, and that's, again, a lot of us don't need those.
I should just add the bottom 30% of our cows, which are genomically tested, are all bred to beef. So we don't even want to test them. I don't want to raise them. I don't want to even look at them.
When heifers are $800 to $2,400, almost every person in this room should be breeding 100% of their cows to beef. If you can buy 3,300 LPI heifers for $2,000, like that, I'm stating a real hard fact, right? If we really are interested in profitability, right? Now, I'm not advocating that, because a lot of us like to breed good cattle. We like to look at good animals, right? But that's the stark reality of economics.
In the interest of time, we'll maybe get our panelists to have some closing remarks, and we'll wrap things up. If you have anything you'd like to add or close with.
If anyone wants to buy our culls, give me a call.
If anybody wants to buy our best, give us a call. It's much more lucrative, and you'll make more money. I thank you for being an attentive audience. You've been great, and it's been a pleasure dialoguing with you.
I guess the only thing I'd add is, again, I can't emphasize more, if you're just going to walk on both sides of the line, you're just going to spend a little bit of money and not be able to measure what you've done. And I think it's important, again, we're talking about genetics, but every other plan I had in my structure tree, like, if we can't measure what we've done, what's the point? So, again, genetics is no different. Jump in, make a plan, make a goal. What do you want to do? And the reality is, if you stick to that plan, 100% will pay for itself economically. Again, what that doesn't mean you have to go out and buy high females and play that game. That is a lot of fun for me and Wayne here. That, you know, I just dabble, and Wayne's a little better at it. But the reality is, you can do that through just focused genetics and focused plans, and no different than saying, hey, I'm going to cut bills down this month and address my financial situation and put a focus on that. So I just don't want everybody to go, hey, we're going to go play the genomic game. Well, you got to be prepared for what that entails. And like Wayne said, it's largely a contact world. So you have to create the contracts to make the sales, and it just doesn't happen overnight. It takes attention to detail, a plan, and otherwise it is, as a genetic nerd, it's really fun. But again, you do need to have a focus of it.
Just to conclude from kind of an industry perspective, I think they did a great job selecting 3 diverse producers with different goals here, and hopefully somebody could learn, or you guys could all learn from these different perspectives. But from an industry perspective, the interest in genomics over the last 9-10 years has been really, really exciting, but the reality is that genetics always worked. Long before that, and genomics has just helped them work even better. And so even if genomic testing isn't really your thing, you are benefiting from it from the sire side. And as time progresses and you become more comfortable on the female end, or your situation changes and you have excess replacements or whatever it be, hopefully you'll gain the confidence to work on the female side as well.
Alrighty. Thanks, guys. We should come together and thank them. So a few housekeeping items before we all hit the road. Just a reminder to fill out your evaluations and return them. And also looking for a little help for the staff around here to grab your garbage and take it to the back as well. I'd just like to add something on behalf of the producers of Gray and Bruce. I'd like to thank Laurie Smith and the other organizers for putting this day and this week together. All right, safe travel, everyone.
He's got a bad ankle.
You're worse than the Japanese are for snapping. Chinese coming, you gotta all stand there for a minute.
So you have to, I would say, like,